video version. It's a joke. It's a joke, Zach.
Yeah. I mean, it's, again, we developed a wrong relationship with fat and sugar when we poisoned mitochondria, and we can no longer use them for fuel. And we broke the relationship. The first thing that happened is we started to see really severe perturbations in our trafficking of fatty acids, which is done through the cholesterol system largely. And we started to add, chemicals like aspartame to our sugar-free stuff, right? So this is all 1980s. And so aspartame, before that, high fructose corn syrup, same kind of problem actually. So high fructose corn syrup is a sugar. Fructose is a very short carbon chain compared to glucose. But it gets everywhere very fast. So fructose is your simplest sugar in some ways. And fructose will typically be converted to glucose so that it can be used by mitochondria. So the liver will package it up as glucose. Fructose, though, is interesting in that it's naturally occurring in a lot of different fruits and vegetables. And so it occurs in apples. It's the main sugar in an apple.
That's the name, fructose.
Yeah, fructose. And so the fructose in an apple turns out to have actually a relatively low glycemic index when delivered in an heirloom apple. And if you've ever chewed on one of those small heirloom apples, you remember how chewy they are. Their crunch is hard. It's hard to bite into, very crunchy, bitter, and very chewy because it's so fibrous. The fiber that naturally occurred in apples is the antidote to the glycemic index of fructose. And so the food developed a balanced way to deliver nutrients in such a way that it wouldn't be inflammatory to the consumer, the animal that would eat it. And so fascinatingly, as we started to favor easier to crunch apples that had more sugar and sweeter thing and less tart and all this, and we hybridized our apple trees over time to make sweeter and sweeter apples over time, we lost the relationship between fructose and fiber. So we biologically engineered out of our apples fiber. Then we come along with processed food and we say, we're going to make high fructose corn syrup instead of sugar, And with that, we completely eliminated all of the starches and fibers from the corn and just picked out this fructose. But it turns out you can't patent a naturally occurring sugar, and so we had to flip the molecule over, which is a trick of biochemistry. It's called the racemic. And so high fructose corn syrup is actually the mirror image of naturally occurring fructose. It's an unnatural sugar. And when you put high fructose corn syrup into a liver, the triglycerides, i.e. one of the main cholesterol carriers, shoots through the roof in the bloodstream rather than the glucose going up. So it doesn't actually even act as a sugar. It acts as a fat, and a fat that can't be digested well.
So it's a zombie sugar.
So it's a zombie sugar. It's a zombie fat. It's a zombie carbon chain, really. We weren't made to handle the mirror image of fructose. And so we don't have a biologic pathway for high fructose corn syrup. So that one's just a non-nutrient. So that one starts causing problems. So we should take high fructose corn syrup out and here's something that makes things sweet without it. It's a sugar alcohol or an aldehyde. Here's something that we would call aspartame. Aspartame is a very strange molecule that hits the tongue as super sweet, known as NutraSweet, which is really clever, right? Nutrition plus the word sweet, NutraSweet, good marketing branding. And so NutraSweet comes in, and when that goes into your bloodstream and hits the liver for the first time, it's immediately converted to wood alcohol. Wood alcohol is kind of famous in medical history because in Prohibition days, 100 years ago, when we banned alcohol everywhere, you have all these stills that were developed in the backyards of houses and everything else, in West Virginia being famous for it, but all over the country. And so people were distilling their own alcohol. And when you don't run the still at the right temperature, you end up with wood alcohol instead of ethanol. And what was happening is when you ingest wood alcohol, you go blind. It poisons the optic nerve and you lose your vision. So blindness was a pretty common side effect of wood alcohol contamination within homemade stills. And then fast forward 70 years later, and we're giving people in their Diet Coke and everything else a molecule that would turn into wood alcohol in their liver. The poison that happens in the body from wood alcohol isn't actually in that first pass. It's when the wood alcohol goes back through the circulation, ends up at the liver a second time, and it's converted to formaldehyde. Maybe you've heard of formaldehyde.
Yeah.
This is what we embalm dead bodies in so that they can't break down. The reason they can't break down is it poisons all enzymes so that nothing can be broken down.
Isn't that also like the sting of a fire ant?
Yeah, there'd be formaldehyde and formic acids are in those and things like that that can turn into them.
Sounds
so,
delicious.
yeah, amazing. And so we started ingesting glyphosate at the same time we started ingesting formaldehyde, basically from our sugar-free foods. And so the glyphosate was poisoning our ability to take naturally occurring glucose and fructose into energy. So we started getting obesity and cholesterol problems. So we start saying, well, we're getting obese. We must have too much sugar. Here's aspartame. So here's poisoning with formaldehyde your entire enzyme detox pathways and everything else. And so it was this advent of processed foods that systematically poisoned humanity into our current state of dysfunction and disease. And so that's been the journey. And now that we know the science, there's a huge opportunity for us to do the opposite, which is get rid of processed food, stop endorsing the increasing processing of nutrients, and start endorsing real food to be grown in the United States again, which frankly isn't done in the U.S. anymore. We only have one county that grows more than 10 species of food, and that's Fresno County, California. Grows over 300 species of food.